20 years ago, the idyllic campus life of the University of North Carolina was disturbed by a phenomenon of the times, the return of the GI Bill-supported veteran. Enrollment mushroomed to unprecedented size. Living and study space caused administrators their greatest concern. But the veterans were sober, mature students dedicated to learning, and this more than compensated for the turmoil. President Frank Graham's magnetic personality and progressive policies attracted many students to the Carolina campus from out of state. So also did the clement weather, the nationally acclaimed football team, and the memory of novelist Thomas Wolfe, a former Chapel Hill undergraduate and instructor. In June '49, North Carolina awarded bachelor degrees to 1,300 men and women. According to a survey made by Fortune magazine, these students and their counterparts throughout the nation had set as their primary goal security. Products of a depression and World War, they wanted safe jobs within big, sound companies and the opportunity to plant deep roots. Today, these graduates in the mid-passage of their lives are assuming positions of leadership in our society. A cursory check on a cross-section of careers shows that David McAdams, who received a degree in music, is now an office systems specialist. Max Cook, college athlete, is secretary of a YMCA. Victor Bell, business major, is now head of a bank. Faith Adams, an English major, is a French teacher. Nelson Benton, business major, is a TV newscaster. Edward Joyner, editor of the school paper, is in public relations. Irving Barker, psychology major, is a lieutenant colonel in the Army. More important than specific careers, however, are the questions of values and goals. In the years since 1949, have they changed? And what are they now? John Swainson was an average student in college. Now 40 years old, he lives with his wife and 3 children in a luxury apartment house in Detroit, Michigan. At one point in his youth, he seriously considered becoming a dentist.
I led a very normal childhood in a small Michigan town. My world changed, I would say, in the early 40s when I went into the military service of the United States. I was on a night patrol and stepped on a landmine that had been planted by the Germans before they withdrew. I woke up about 4 days later in a hospital in Verdun. Both my legs had been amputated at that time, and I began that long, rather painful journey back to the United States through the Army hospital system. Probably the first social consciousness that I became aware of occurred at Percy Jones Hospital in Battle Creek. The man that was in the bed next to me had also had his legs amputated, and he was a Negro. Many of us, of course, were anticipating the opportunity of going on to college, and I recall he explaining one night some of the extra problems that he had just because his skin was darker than mine. Although we both lost our legs in the same war, fighting for the same thing, he was limited as to where he could go to school. Well, to me, this was, I just could not understand it.
Ambulatory a year after his operation, John undertook a pre-law course at North Carolina. Receiving a law degree there in 1951, he returned to Michigan, where he was soon caught up in state politics and elected senator in 1954. In 1958, he was elected lieutenant governor. In 1960, John Swainson was elected governor of Michigan on the Democratic ticket. He was 35 years old. In 1962, having served 1 term in office, Swainson lost the re-election in a close race to George Romney, the Republican candidate. He then returned to private life and reorganized a law firm, which he had formed some years earlier. Finding it difficult to represent clients who often sought ways around laws he helped legislate, Swainson once again chose to run for public office. This past year, he was elected to a circuit court judgeship. While a sense of social justice undoubtedly has played a great part in the direction his life has taken, there is question whether a career in government was inevitable. He acknowledges that his goals were unclear when he left the service, and the decision to pursue a law degree at North Carolina was based mainly on the results of a GI Bill aptitude test.
Everyone rise, please. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The Circuit Court for the
As
County
a
of
trial
Williamson,
judge, you are making decisions daily that affect persons' lives, and this sometimes causes a deal of anxiety when you relate this to the former decisions that were made, sort of engrossed. You actually didn't see the person whose activities you had limited by placing a sanction in the law, but as a trial judge, you do. You can see the hopes, you can see the great disappointments in their faces. But you are the judge, and you must make the decision.
In the evenings when he'd come home from work, and then he began to stay home from work to drink. It was just a continual thing.
I have no further questions, counsel. You may step down, Mrs. Livingston. Counsel, if you will prepare a judgment of divorce in this matter, we will provide that a judgment of divorce will be entered for the plaintiff, Carol Ann Livingston, against the defendant, John Livingston. And as part of that judgment of divorce, the custody of the minor child of the parties, Matthew, will be placed with the plaintiff. There being no property involved, the usual dower provision will be.
There was little spirit of rebellion in the class of 1949. They tended as a group to shy away from controversial issues. John Swainson's personal experiences, however, moved him to undertake the solutions to politically unpopular problems. As governor, he initiated laws against discrimination in housing and appointed the first Negro to the state's Supreme Court. For the most part, Swainson and his classmates have achieved their goal of material security. But in doing so, new problems have been created.
Quite frankly, I sometimes wonder about our present-day society. Have we become too affluent? Are things too easily obtained? How does a parent instill in his children this desire that he wants to see develop, the striving to be best, to do something? And this causes me a great deal of concern. I sometimes wonder whether or not by enjoying the highest living standard known to man, we have not somehow denied them the opportunity of working and earning their way. That meaningful in passing or not passing a right to so-called right to work.
Marilyn, would you like another
Principle of told or propagandized. Before I could speculate on what I will be doing 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I would have to live through those same 5 or 10 years, and whatever abilities I have, I hope to utilize them in the interest of all the people. I can think of nothing more satisfying than working for your fellow man, working as a public official. People that a person that's unemployed 10 weeks probably needs unemployment compensation more than the person that's unemployed just 2 weeks.
Recently, the March of Time conducted an extensive survey of North Carolina's class of 49. Among the many facts revealed, 60% of the graduates are Democrats, 30% Republicans, 5% are civil servants, and 22% are in business for themselves. To this latter group belongs a Phi Beta Kappa scholar, Ed Davenport, son of a Carolina farmer. Shortly after graduation, he acquired the Ford Agency in Farmville, a tobacco town of 7,000. An aggressive, ambitious salesman, he built the dealership into an exceptionally profitable one before selling his interest in it to enter a new field. Unlike many of his classmates who looked for secure positions within big corporations, Ed chose the challenge of this highly competitive business, and as a corollary to it, became the prime mover in the town's development program, which has brought 5 new substantial industries to Farmville. Fred Weaver was dean of students when Ed served as president of the class of 49.
The 2 things I remember well about Ed were that he managed to get the best grades with the least apparent effort of anyone I know, and that he took his responsibilities as class leader more seriously than most young men. His decision to remain in North Carolina could have been predicted because so many students who knew him by reputation and so many of his friends were local people who also settled in the state.
The last few years have been very fruitful in terms of experience, in terms of know-how developed, in terms of feeling of achievement. However, it's been hard to find a balance in terms of doing and in terms of reserving certain time for one's family. Perhaps in the years ahead, I'll be better able to achieve this balance, working, driving, doing, and yet finding moments of relaxation with one's family.
Ed was one of the original incorporators of Thermatics, a manufacturer of high-temperature wire and cable. Now free of his car agency commitment, he is in the process of undertaking the active presidency of the company.
At the time of graduation, I recall being interviewed by several national corporations and deciding that I did not care to go into the corporate life at that time. I felt that ultimately I wanted to be in business for myself. This idea of free enterprise had a great deal of weight in my choice of what I would later do. I remember many years ago sitting in an economics classroom at the University of North Carolina, and the instructor, a very able person, indicated that at that time his concern was that in the years as we look forward, there would be three big powers: big business, big labor, and big government. I've seen this come true. I'm even more concerned in the years that lie ahead. An idea, if you will, of what you feel the capacity of our plant is in relation to what income... I am concerned that this nation is rapidly moving towards a regulated society in which the individual and a dynamic way of life is suppressed. I don't think it's intended. And I know that social progress is a very necessary thing in terms of national planning. But I feel that in many cases, individual initiative is stifled as the emphasis is placed upon security rather than upon opportunity. It is to be done, the tremendous challenge out there.
With the advent of television, there had come a force for reshaping the attitudes, values, and tastes of the nation. The lives of the class of '49 would be profoundly affected by this medium, as viewers and, for some, as participants. Andrew Griffith was born and raised in Mount Airy, North Carolina. When he entered the university, he was planning to become either a musician, preacher, or teacher. He soon caught the acting bug, however, and immersed himself in the drama department's productions. He also married his leading lady.
I spent 2 years in the 4th grade, and I took 5 years to get out of college, and I nearly flunked out of school several times because I was in plays. And I think, very honestly, they were glad to get rid of me. I grew up very slowly. I'm 39 now, and I've been in the business about 10 to 12 years. And somewhere during that 10 or 12 years, I began to mature a little bit, and I'm still trying to mature.
After several years of struggle as an entertainer on the Southern nightclub circuit, Andy Griffith got his first big break, the lead in a television adaptation of the novel No Time for Sergeants. In the course of repeating the role on Broadway and in the film, he became a star. For the past 5 years, he has had one of the most successful comedy series on television. In a relatively short time, he has achieved the performer's two most elusive goals: fame and security. The University of North Carolina's production of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta first lured Andy to the stage. Professor Foster Fitzsimmons was the director.
At that first audition, he was awkward, gawky, with the loudest voice I ever heard, but with such a will to please that we all found ourselves grinning, not at him, but with him. Of course we cast him. All that Andy ever needed was an audience. Well, he proved that over and over all the time he was here at the university. I can't say it was any surprise to any of us who worked with him what he did afterwards.
I have taken the best parts of myself and my mother and my father and people that I've known all my life
and put them into Andy Taylor. And there are parts of myself that I will not put into Andy Taylor, nor will I tell anybody about them, because I only want the best parts to show so everybody will like me.
Well, where's Mr. Wonderful?
He's probably over at the crossing. He'll be along in a little bit. Barn, there's something I want to tell you about.
I know. He's a graduate of the Sheriff's Academy.
Oh, did you hear that? Well, did you also hear?
Yeah. Fourth in his class, a regular Captain Marvel.
Andy Griffith has made his name and fortune as a rural humorist, an easygoing, likable, and uncomplicated character. Yet in the one dramatic role he essayed in 1957, he proved himself to be a serious actor of exceptional depth and talent. The film was a face in the crowd, a biting satire of a power-mad rural humorist.
I think anybody here would like to do a fine dramatic role, but there are none coming along for me at this time. One will sometime, and I will do it, and I'll do it the best I can.
Of course, you would have a hand free.
The only thing I would ever want to do in politics is vote, which I do and which I will. I will not express my personal views publicly because I am a joke teller, and that's all I am. I don't have enough sense about what's going on and the ways to solve problems. So I'll just keep my own personal views to myself.
The liberal atmosphere created at North Carolina by President Graham drew Al Lowenstein, a New Yorker, to the southern campus.
Well, as a child, I was very small and funny-looking, and I skipped second grade, which made me even smaller and something of an outsider. When that happens, you're likely to get pushed around a lot and to kind of withdraw into yourself. And, well, I think I became pretty obnoxious. It took a long time to learn how to handle myself and how to cope with this kind of situation.
Al received a degree in history from North Carolina. During his college years, he involved himself deeply in campus politics and reform movements. Soon after taking a law degree at Yale, he spent 6 months in Southwest Africa and helped a native spokesman escape to the United Nations, where they both testified on conditions in that territory. He has worked as special assistant to Senators Frank Graham and Hubert Humphrey. He has been influential in discussions of higher education, both as president of the National Student Association and as a member of 2 university faculties. He has worked closely with such leaders as Eleanor Roosevelt on Democratic Party policy. He was also instrumental in forming the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and the 1964 Mississippi Summer Project. This past summer, Al worked as chairman of Citizens for Ryan, an unsuccessful contender for mayor in the New York primaries.
Well, that's the point, but they won't... No, because they're friends of mine. What I'm trying to tell you is, off the record, I've said to them, look, we can get so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Will you cover it and do a...
Active in campus politics with Al was John Sanders, now director of the Institute of Government at North Carolina.
The experience of losing has always been less devastating to Al than to most of us. The principle of the thing is what counts mainly for him. He has more compassion for others than anyone in our generation I've ever known. I think this is what compels him to be the political animal he is.
At the time Fortune surveyed the class of '49, it found a recurrent theme. Students felt a compulsion to do something worthwhile for society, although few could define what it was. For Al Lowenstein, however, commitment to causes has been a way of life. Since his teaching days at Stanford and North Carolina State, young people have played a large part in his activities, as in the case of an organization he helped form which seeks Red China's admission to the United Nations.
I'm not convinced that the Chinese communists want peace, and I'm not a pacifist, so it seems clear that there could be times when you'd have to fight. But it's only common sense, it seems to me, to try to find out if there's any way of living in the world with the Chinese without either giving in on vital things or fighting them. And that means negotiating with them.
Since his days at Chapel Hill, Al's commitment to civil rights affairs has gotten him involved in numerous projects. A pressing problem at this time was the Free Southern Theater.
And the improv in Bogalusa, when I find my brother has been shot, and they thought it was a core work, and all the white people were slapping their thighs, and they're so glad. I run out and I say, my God, it's my brother. There was a very still silence, and then all of a sudden, they roared with laughter of the harshest and most frightening kind.
Great oppression sometimes breeds great heroes. Now, the ones who've been bred in Mississippi lately are mostly Mississippians. But there have also been a lot of people who went into that state from outside. And among the most unsung of these are the actors of the Free Southern Theater, who went there with almost no money and endured all the risks that everybody else endured, plus all the hardships of producing plays under the most difficult circumstances. Now that they've run out of money, we're trying to get enough together so they can go on.
Al currently assists his brother Larry in the administration of the family businesses. At the moment, this work provides his sole income.
I had very loving parents, and although I enjoyed teaching very much, toward the end of my father's life, it seemed I might be of some help in his business. I've heard that some of my friends find it a little amusing to think of me as a businessman. But I'd like to say that in some ways you have a lot more freedom to express points of view and do things you care about when you're in business for yourself than, say, when you're a professor.
And you know who came to my defense?
Al maintains close ties with Norman Thomas, retired leader of the Socialist Party, Mrs. Frank Graham, and Dr. Frank, as he was known to all Carolina students.
Every now and then someone asks if I wouldn't like to hold public office. And I think in some ways that could be a useful thing to do. But I think it warps your values if getting to positions of power becomes a major goal of your life. Now, the three public figures that have meant the most to me, Mrs. Roosevelt, Frank Graham, and in these last years, Norman Thomas, they made the enormous contributions that they've made because they tried to do what they thought was right, regardless of the consequences to their careers. And most of the things they've done that have been most useful haven't been in public office as such. Now, I know I can't be like they've been, but I think one thing we can learn from them is that it's not a waste of time to fight the things you believe in, even if winning that particular fight seems unlikely at the moment.
And we had fascist speakers, communist speakers, right-wing speakers, moderate-wing speakers. We had every kind of speaker. That a university should not be afraid of freedom.
Helen Suzman supporting Bill Ryan, though I'm sure Bill Ryan is supporting Helen Suzman.
Those who knew Al at Chapel Hill remember him as an activist, perhaps even a troublemaker. But they all agree he was the kind of student who made campus life somehow more exciting, more vital, and more meaningful.
The trouble with these long-range battles is that they tend to accumulate. Because once you get concerned about some injustice, you can't just drop it. So you find yourself wondering whether you're really being as effective as you'd like in any of these areas. Then, too, as we progress toward removing the external causes of human misery, it's becoming clearer that we're now at the point where we have to face a whole new range of problems. Now, traditional liberalism doesn't help much with this new range of problems we have to face. Problems of the spirit, of the interior being. The sort of after two cars what dilemma, finding new uses for time and ways in which people can relate better to each other and find standards of morality that make sense to them. So there's a lot I want to learn and try to say about what makes people tick. A lot of new things I hope to do and understand. Like most people, I'd like to finish a novel sometime, and like most people, I'd like to have a family and maybe more leisure than I've usually had. But it's been a lot of fun through the years feeling you're involved in things that matter to people you care about. And mostly, I'm grateful to live in this country at this time. In fact, with all the things that are wrong, it's a wonderful time to be moving into. If you do the best you can at the things that are of interest to you and try not to cause needless hardships for others, the whole experience, though it goes awfully fast, is a great and worthwhile one.
Jay, if you can get the text of it ready and whatever you remember of the changes so we can take it in. This is Allard Lowenstein. Do you have it?
Baseball claimed a good deal of Harry Beeson's time at North Carolina. Today, he is a business machine sales representative. Basketball star Dan Nimitz is today a golf professional.
Justice received. Fade back. He passes. Bob Cox makes a beautiful catch. He's at the 40-yard line, and he's on his way. He's at the 25, and he's in the clear. He's at the 15. He's going over for a touchdown.
Ex-Marine Robert Cox played right in for the champion Tar Heels. The field run against LSU was a high point in his career. His specialty was extra point kicking, for which he earned the nickname the Toe.
All during college, I was aiming for one thing, and that was to teach and coach. I had no thoughts or ideas of participating in corporate activity. So I coached football there for 3 years at the university, and we weren't winning too many football games, and we were having children kind of fast. So I opened a ladies' and men's clothing store there in Chapel Hill. I loved the selling portions of it. But when what we used to class as dog days would come around, there weren't many people interested in buying. This was kind of hard on me. When the opportunity was presented to me to go with Pepsi-Cola Company, it was probably one of the biggest decisions that I had to make. I had the usual fears that people have when they think of this great big city of New York. I also was harboring a secret desire to make a run at New York and see if I could make it. I think the decision was right.
Hello, John. Yeah, this is Bob Cox. How's everything out our way? Yeah, well, we were gone all last week down in Washington at the field meetings and then presented it to the Eastern Division.
The class of 49 has had to be far more mobile than they had anticipated. Each member has changed communities an average of 4 times since graduation. In many cases, they have also found their way into large corporations, stayed there, and by now risen to executive positions. For Bob Cox, it has taken just 4 years to become a vice president.
My job here is not 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and where that might be fine for some, I don't think that I could ever be happy with something like that. I have a job to do, and the job is supposed to be done. If it isn't, well, they probably find somebody else to do it. So there are times when it's not real easy. Well, it seems that the industry is going more and more toward now. I find that those that you deal with by and large in large corporate activities are personalities that arrive a little earlier, stay a little later, do their homework a little bit better. They are a little bit more tenacious than maybe some that I had been dealing with.
New promotions are the myth.
In 46, 7, and 8, we had some fine football teams, and let there be no mistake about it. It makes a difference when you're on a winning team. You get a feeling and a confidence that you probably couldn't get in any other way. You get knocked down, you have to get back up and go again. You have to learn to work with people as a team, and you learn that you have a responsibility to carry out. And everybody, if they do this on the team, then you're going to be successful.
While the constant shifting of routes has undoubtedly posed many problems to Bob Cox's classmates and their children, it has also broadened their perspectives.
As I've been active with a large corporation and now living in this largest city of them all, I believe that my philosophy has become a little bit more liberal, and that I see the wisdom more of legislation that would involve the needs, whether it be social or economic, of more people. My greatest challenge today is to prepare my sons so that they can be a productive, efficient citizen in society. I'd like to be around to see some of these things they're going to be exposed to, but unfortunately we all have to bid adieu at one time or another. But I'm very positive in my thinking that the opportunities are great. And this country is going to become even greater than today.
The median income of male graduates of North Carolina's class of 49 is $15,000. The average age, 40. Victor Seixas, a customs man in a Philadelphia brokerage firm, is now 43, having spent 4 war years in the Army Air Corps. His late start in civilian life also delayed the realization of a consuming boyhood ambition. In the world of amateur tennis, victory at Wimbledon is the ultimate goal. Vic had worked toward this day in 1953, since first entering competition play at the age of 15. This same year found him on America's victorious Davis Cup team, which he represented for 7 consecutive years. At the peak of his form in 53 and 4, he topped an already outstanding season by winning the Nationals at Forest Hills. With his wife Dolly, a Carolina co-ed, Vic toured the international tennis circuit full-time, from graduation until retiring in 1958.
Right, hold on a minute. Jake, buy 500 WMK at the market, will you? Thank you. The market here is 19.
I think that actually, once you achieve a goal or a number of goals, I think there is obviously a certain letdown after that. I mean, you've spent a great deal of time preparing yourself in every way to try to achieve these goals, and when you do achieve it, there's a great feeling of satisfaction and pride and gratefulness, and then following this, there's a certain letdown. However, I think then the thing to do is to try to transfer these energies and these desires into some other field. But otherwise, you'd feel like, well, that's the end. I've done everything I'm going to do, and there's no point in trying anything else.
See about the calendar coming up this week.
The ideal life projected by the class of 49, as related by the Fortune consensus, was to be, first and foremost, a calm and ordered one. The tangible goals were a good wife, 3 children, 2 cars, and a house on a quiet street. This all could be managed on $10,000 a year. At the time of graduation, Vic's talent and temperament did not lend themselves to this conservative dream.
I just never felt that I wanted to make my living out of playing tennis. I didn't want to do it as a playing professional or as a teaching professional. I love the game, and it's probably the biggest thing in my life, but I would rather approach it from the playing point of view, just for the fun of it or for the competitive nature of it, and not want to make my living out of it if I could make my living any other way. I feel, even to this day, a great thrill, I think, to hit the ball well and make a good shot. I've been now working in the investment business for, well, it's almost 8 years now. We've bought a home, my wife and I. We have no children. We're sort of settling down from a very gypsy life that we've had for years to a relatively normal one now.
All these trophies in this case, there's one which impresses me very much, and that's the big tray.
My interest now is to try to make enough money to live a nicer life than I would have if I'd just kept scrounging around playing tennis.
St. Andrews.
We have no special goals or anything like that we're working on. I'm still pretty much getting started in business, and I'd like to work towards building that up.
The ever-increasing affluence of the American family has been altering the traditional role of the housewife. No longer are college-educated women content to stay at home, but most have found frustratingly few opportunities to make use of their training. 1,000 co-eds graced the North Carolina campus in 1949. Fern Hughes, a music major, was one of the most socially active and popular girls in the senior class. Her dating days ended before graduation, however, with her engagement to Pretlow Winborn, a law student. They were married that June and settled in Raleigh, where Pretlow is presently city judge. Fern Winborn, mother of 4, now devotes a great deal of time to an antique business, set up 2 years ago in the rear of their home.
So many of my acquaintances in Raleigh have a rather stagnant way of living. It seems to me, though, they enjoy going to play bridge at the country club 2 or 3 times a week, and they go to the dances at the country club every other weekend. Husbands play golf while the wives are playing bridge, I suppose. I just can't exist like that. I need something more than just this kind of thing. And they think that I don't know, they probably think I'm crazy. Having a large family in a fairly short time, I've interspersed my babies with various activities, the Junior League, some things for pleasure, volunteer work, and so forth. And I feel these things are very valuable. But I also feel like I've done my share of these, and I find myself not wanting to be involved in any sort of committee work for anything.
While Fern's college days were filled with the exciting social events which befall a pretty, high-spirited girl, she was also a dedicated music student and had serious, if short-lived, plans for a singing career. For most of the co-eds of 49, however, the prevailing philosophy still valued marriage before career, and since men outnumbered women 7 to 1, the choice was even simpler. The March of Time survey of Fern's class shows that less than 2% have ever been divorced. The Winborns spend their summers in Oriental, a secluded village on the North Carolina coast.
Within my rather narrow scope, geographically, I've been exposed to enough of the seamy side of life so that I know how lucky I am. We've all been healthy. I have wonderful children. I have lovely parents, a nice brother. I picked a wonderful man to live with. It just sounds, it sounds too good. The most important person to me has been my husband, Pretlow. We spend a lot of time together. In every way, I really couldn't. He's just been perfect in every way. He has this gift of, he has given me the gift of allowing me to be a free individual.
Of the 1,300 graduates of North Carolina in 49, Stark Spotswood Dillard, son of a prosperous businessman, was one of 8 to seek a career as a clergyman. For the past 5 years, he has served the Episcopal Church in Smithfield, North Carolina, a tobacco town of 7,000 inhabitants. Prior to this parish, he had lived with his wife and children in Germany, where he was an Air Force chaplain. The decision to pass up his family's paper business in favor of the church was crystallized at Chapel Hill, where he first completed his degree in English.
I would like to be real heroic and say that I was concerned about the world and other people's needs, but I think it were my own needs that I was more concerned about. Being at seminary, while I had a great deal of confidence, I felt like it was a matter of having a nice sermon and being able to conduct beautiful services and keeping clean, being a decent citizen, and being sweet, And I lived off this idea for a long time. It's not glamorous. It's a hard job. I don't have any confidence at all. The only confidence I have is that if anything's going to be accomplished, it's going to be God possibly somehow or another working through me.
And your father will, but nobody else will, so don't worry about it. That's pretty sharp. You're looking great. The main thing about it is don't slouch around and don't pull any stunts like picking your nose or your ear or brushing or scratching. If you're ill and need some help, punch somebody next to you and tell them to help you out. But don't sit here and suffer. The problem about the worship is not suffering, it's to worship God. It's a glorious feeling to know that people love you and like you and just have to have you. And I think that's one of the reasons we're in the business. Of course, this can be very unfair, and you can make people very dependent on you. I try to be very careful about that. At times, as I go into these situations, I wonder whether or not there's going to be any possible way for me to exist, and what in the world I'm doing there. And it's when I'm able to just say I'll be an instrument of God's love, not my love, because I'm sometimes real short on love. When I can allow myself to be a channel of God's love, there's somehow or another these things work out. It's a meaningful experience for all of us. And luckily, as time goes along, you realize that you're not God, and that God is God. And possibly the solution to all the problems don't rest just with you. This keeps you from panicking and running away and getting lost. You know there are a lot of people there won't want you as a friend, and you got to accept that and leave. And you know that you can't win really a popularity contest. That the clergyman, I can only speak for myself, I live very comfortably. The people care about whether or not I'm well clothed and well fed. There's a lot of security, I think, in the way of income and housing and transportation. Chances are I'm too well taken care of, either by my family or by the church itself. I hope that I don't sell my soul or trade in my whole life to gain material things.
Stark Dillard's generation experienced a youth filled with calamitous events, yet the nature of the social and political ills of the time were to be easily defined and the cures apparent.
We've got a world, and we're parents in a world, that the teenagers are facing. And they all face some military service, and the issues are not clear to them. So they're facing a world of uncertainty, and they know they'll be facing it the rest of their lives. Maybe this uncertainty will be our salvation in the sense it will make us say, is there a God? And if there is a God, why is he doing all this to us? If God is God, why are we having such a mess in his world? And maybe then we'll be led to realize our own responsibility in this world, and that the mess is because God has given us that freedom to make a mess out of it.
The night after this dance, a regional rally of the Ku Klux Klan was held on the outskirts of Smithfield. Although the mayor had refused the Klan a permit to march in town, and there was only one known member of the group from Smithfield, the community was nevertheless greatly disturbed to find this extremist organization in its midst.
St. Paul's Church is proud of the fact that it's not a segregated church. Of course, we have to turn right around and admit that there are no Negro Episcopalians, because we live in a community where the Episcopal Church was late coming into. We've theoretically solved the problem of segregation in St. Paul's Church, but in actual practice, we've not had to deal with the problem too much. I hope that I have a keen understanding about how people feel about the segregation problem. And know that I am very firm on the issue, that if anyone is turned away from the door, that the minister goes with them.
A thing, an opinion, a prejudice, a hate, an indifference,
Now, most of us yesterday played it cool. And I played it cool. And we went to the golf course, and we went to the bridge table, and we worked in the yard, and we stayed away, and we denied anything was happening. Maybe we forgot the witness that we could make to the people who were trying to make some kind of witness, however wrong it was. What leads a person to do this? What is the need to have to do this? What is the need to have to bring about a situation that might explode? Maybe we have something to do with it. You have a choice, and I have a choice. And the choice that we make is a witness. And not just a witness, something that God's going to use, but really an opportunity to be in the presence of God. The witness that you make is not so important about how it's going to civilize our community and how many changes it's going to work. It's the greatest opportunity is how you are able to respond and how I am able to respond to God. That's what it's all about.
In the course of observing the lives of 8 graduates of the class of 1949, it has become clear that their statistical similarities are outweighed by the differences in philosophy, taste, and personality they reflect as individuals. There are perhaps only a few significant generalizations to be made of this post-war class's character. They are men and women with a deeply felt appreciation of the blessings our society has afforded them. In our March of Time survey, they agree almost unanimously that they have attained the goals set for themselves in college. Only one graduate expressed dissatisfaction with life. The class of 49 has made its dream of material security come true. And this insular contentment, for better or worse, is finding its reflection in American society today. Today, enrollment on college campuses has more than doubled since the record class of 1949. Living and study space is once again a major concern, and perhaps one of only a few these two generations have shared in common. The class of 66, as indicated by a recent Fortune survey, is anxious to avoid the security-oriented pattern of the World War II veterans. Having experienced a relatively trouble-free and bountiful youth, they see no reason to surrender their ideals to careers which might restrict their individuality. There is general disdain for the corporate life and sincere interest in areas of endeavor where they can actively serve the welfare of others. Careers in teaching, social work, the arts, and politics will claim far more of these students than they did in 49. Time marches on.